All right. Welcome back to the Tank Me Later podcast. This is episode 70. And today we're going to be continuing our Dynasty Outlook series. And we're going to be talking about small forwards with William Harris. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. As I said, we are continuing this little series and we are going to be talking about small forwards. I'm going to go ahead and bring in William Harris. You can find him on Twitter at WilliamIsBill. And he's the host of the All Rookie Podcast, a Dynasty expert. William, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Noah. So glad to be on with you. We finally got to put this together, so I can't wait to talk about small forwards.
Yeah. And when I did the last episode with David Williams, we were talking about shooting guards. And I was kind of like, wow, like the shooting guard position isn't that exciting. And I mean, we briefly talked about it before. It's like depending on your interpretation of small forward, because pretty much everybody that used to fit like the small forward model tends to be more of a quote unquote power forward now, just because of positionless basketball. It's just depends on the way your team is built, who's in the starting lineup is who is a small forward versus who is a power forward. You can go pretty far down the list before you find like a quote unquote true small forward. Again, depending on your interpretation. But if we're just talking about guys that are small forward eligible, I think it extends the list a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring up this little slideshow just so we can have some guys talk about a little something in the background. But who do you have as the top small forwards in Dynasty fantasy basketball?
Okay, for me in Dynasty, and like you were saying, it's so positionless. Most small forwards can play the 2, the 3, or the 4. So I see you have Franz Wagner in your picture there. I consider Paolo more of a 3. They're interchangeable. But for my Dynasty guys, I have Scotty Barnes, Jason Tatum, and Paolo. But if Paolo is a 4, I'm cool with Brandon Miller being in there as well. So they're pretty much interchangeable right there. Those are my top 3.
Yeah, and I would assume that Jason Tatum would be like the number 1 on that list for Dynasty. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if it is Jason Tatum, then who would you kind of have as like the number 2 between the guys you mentioned?
For me, I'm a little biased to Scotty Barnes. It's neck and neck for those two for me. So I'm very high on Scotty Barnes. When he was coming into the draft, on my show, the All Rookie Podcast, I have very high hopes for him. A lot of people were skeptical about the pick, and I think he is turning into the player I hoped he would. Just the way he can put up stats all around. And no slight to Jason Tatum, even though Steve Kerr hates him right now, but he's still right there. And, Paolo, he just got to put it together. He has all the talent. He's an all-star, but his ranking in fantasy is not the greatest, obviously, but I think he'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, he's a 6'10", like, I don't remember exactly how much he weighs, but he's a big guy. Like, that field goal percentage should go up. I don't know about the free throw percentage, but the field goal percentage should go up at some point in his career. I guess it depends on how much he wants to improve his shot selection, because we know he likes to take contested shots because he is a player that can make those kind of shots. But as far as Scotty Barnes, obviously he had a really good rookie year, was good in year 2, and then kind of exploded this past season. Was a second-round finisher, just outside the top 20 per Basketball Monster. Is he a guy that you're expecting him to, I guess, kind of trend towards being? I mean, he kind of already is the franchise player there. Like, he's the guy that they're starting to build around. Are you expecting him to take another step forward this season?
I definitely am, because this year he's going to have a full season without OG and Pascal. So it's from day one, it's going to be his team. And I think he's only going to improve. He's like 21 years old and already this good. It's just scary how talented he could be. I hate to throw it out there, but he's on the Giannis trajectory. So, that's definitely a great dynasty asset you would want to have.
Yeah, Giannis that can shoot better. I mean, I think that that's hard to beat, hard to argue against. I would have absolutely had him in there, but like, again, just depending on the position, I didn't have him on there because I was, in my mind, he's more of a power forward. Gotcha. Same thing with Tatum and Paolo. But again, I think that's what kind of makes this, like, doing it by position a little bit difficult, because it just kind of depends on your interpretation for each one. But definitely 3 elite dynasty guys. The 3 guys that I have on my list, 2 of them are pictured here. Obviously, Franz Wagner, Jalen Williams, and then I went with a different Celtic in Jaylen Brown, who might be the only player that Team USA is less high on than Jason Tatum, with Tatum sitting on the bench and Jaylen Brown not even getting invited. Grant Hill did have the quote saying that he'll consider Jaylen Brown as part of the pool in 2028. Obviously, that's 4 years away, but hopefully we'll see what happens. It's always a little bit of drama with who gets left off, because it's just such a stacked team. But without getting too much into Team USA, the 3 guys that I have, Jalen Williams, Franz Wagner, and Jaylen Brown, between them, who would you be highest on?
Say the 3 one more time.
Is Jalen Williams, Franz Wagner, and Jaylen Brown.
I think you would have to go with J-Dub, just the way he finished last year. He was 41st. And, he is solely, I think, that shooting guard of the future. They have a lot of point guards. They have Chet, obviously, and Shea. But I think if they stick with him, he's going to continue to get better. 19 points per game, multi-positional player. I think Lou Dort is probably going to be moved soon.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think he is part of the core 3 future for OKC. Franz is going to be great, but he is going to have to always share with Paolo. And then they brought in a Franz Wagner duplicate, basically. So I don't know how that's going to, with Da Silva. But, I just really feel Jalen Williams will be that guy that will stay in the top 50.
Just kind of a segue, get off topic. That's what I like to do on this podcast, get off topic. But you mentioned Tristan Da Silva. I liked him. I don't remember exactly where I had him ranked, but I saw definitely some mixed opinions on him. Is he a player that you're high on?
Yeah, I actually had him ranked 12th in this draft. He ended up going 18th, and we saw he had a great summer league. He may be buried in Orlando, but he definitely has the great size, great shooting. That's what every team wants these days.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a versatile player. I don't remember, because I know I did draft grades. I don't remember exactly what I gave Orlando, but it was like they need shooting. Like they definitely need shooting, and he can provide that. Smart player, older prospect, so fits in. Anyways, back on topic. Jalen Williams, yeah, he's the guy that I would be highest on, because he's already been so good in fantasy while playing alongside SGA, while playing alongside Chet, and like, it doesn't feel like his game is dependent on volume. I think he's a guy that's going to be productive regardless of who's playing around him, because he's just incredibly efficient and can do stuff without the ball. And specifically on the defensive end, we've seen with the steals. I think that is a little bit more of my concern with Franz, is the fact that he's obviously a very talented player, but the production just hasn't been there. I'm hoping that maybe this upcoming season that he can, I guess it almost feels like he doesn't need to take a step as a player. Like, he obviously still has room to improve, but just being more aggressive would be big for him, and just like, seeing what he can make happen, which obviously, as you mentioned, playing alongside Paolo for hopefully a long time in Orlando, because that'd be a lot of fun to watch them play together and grow together. Going to be a scary duo in the East for a long time, but definitely is going to limit him a little bit, which is the same thing with Jaylen Brown playing alongside 5 all-star caliber players in Boston. But any other guys that we haven't talked about that you would say? Oh, actually, before we do that, you mentioned Brandon Miller. I really like Brandon Miller. How optimistic, what do you think his ceiling is in fantasy?
Well, I definitely think he can get in the top 75 this year. He was 116 last year, and he's ranked around 100 by ESPN right now, but averaged 17 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal. And I think those numbers will only get better. It was his first season. I was not even high on him being the second pick. I thought Scoot should have been picked over him. He proved he was ready, that size, length, shooting. And it looks like he's definitely the future for Charlotte. Miles Bridges was the guy who was in high consideration, was going to get a max contract. He obviously ruined that. So, he's only getting $25 million a year now. So it seems like it's LaMelo and Brandon Miller's team, and Miles Bridges is more just there as opposed to being the guy in front of Brandon Miller now.
Yeah. You mentioned that you thought that Charlotte should have taken Scoot over Brandon Miller. And I feel like I say that pretty much every single time I talk about Brandon Miller because and at some point in his career, I'm just going to have to stop saying it because had a really good rookie year. He's like past that narrative. But in my mind, I feel like I was like over hating on him for a period of time because I was like so mad. I was like, Charlotte, why didn't you just take Scoot Henderson, pair him with LaMelo Ball, and it would be a lot of fun? But you went with Brandon Miller. And like, throughout the course of his rookie year, I just enjoyed watching him play more and more. And now I really like Brandon Miller. And I was like, maybe I never hated Brandon Miller. I just thought that Scoot Henderson should have been the pick. But based on their rookie years, like it seems like Charlotte did what was best for them and it worked out. So yeah, no, I love his upside. Hopefully it'll continue to pan out in fantasy the way it looks on the court. Obviously he's drawn the Paul George comparisons because that's his favorite player. And he plays a little bit like him. So if he's able to replicate that level of fantasy production, then yeah, that dude's going to be really freaking good for a long time.
And he didn't play with Melo pretty much at all last year because Melo missed so much of the season. He should only provide him easier buckets this year and make the team better. He should get better numbers all around, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been my thing for a good bit of the players on the team is specifically Brandon Miller, is that LaMelo he played 22 games last year. Also, Mark Williams played 19 games. That's not opening up a ton, but this team was basically Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, and some other guys for the second half of the year, at least. So, yeah, hopefully playing with a little bit more talent around them. I think that they'll be in contention for at least by the end of the year. They won't be full on tanking. They'll be kind of in the mix for the play-in tournament, I'm hoping. But as far as what we've talked about, the guys we talked about, is there anybody else that you think, they should be in consideration for best dynasty small forward or like kind of being in this top tier that we haven't talked about?
As far as dynasty, I think it kind of drops off after those guys because, like you said, you mentioned Jaylen Brown. They get a little bit older. Right. Obviously, they're still young in real life terms, but when you're looking at dynasty, you want those like 24 and under guys. So I think I'll probably cap it there. Do you have someone you can sneak in there? I don't know if Keegan Murray is ready to do it yet.
Yeah, and I mean, Keegan Murray's like a guy that, again, if you have him as a small forward, like he's a guy that you could have in there. I'd have Devin Vassell if I had him, but I talked about him during the shooting guard episode, so I'm not going to try and double dip there. But as far as being in that top tier, probably not. Just doing a quick look through. Yeah. So there's a lot of guys I feel like that are young that have a lot of upside that with a good season or two could move into that tier. But a lot of it is just we're waiting on guys like Tari Easton, if you have him as a small forward, or like a Trey Murphy, or guys that, they've done it in short spurts, but there's questions about the role, questions about the minutes. We haven't really seen it, I guess, too consistently through their first handful of years in the league. But we will move on to the underrated players section. I only have two for this one, but I will let you start with your two guys that you have as underrated.
Okay, I got some big names for underrated. So they're rated still high, but
yeah,
Jimmy Butler, I consider him a small forward. He's ranked 48th by ESPN, 39th by Yahoo, but he was 28th last year. Obviously, he missed a lot of games, so it's per game. But I definitely think he will be healthier this year. The previous season, he dragged his team through the playoffs each year. This year, they didn't have to go through that, and he pretty much sat out the whole year. So him being 28th in a bad year, refreshed, I think he will, definitely be worth value if he's around the 40s this year. And you can get him in the 40s, and he should be a top 30 guy for sure. I just think a lot of people will shy away from older guys and often injured guys. And Jimmy Butler is reeking of that. But I think he'll have a good season next year in a redraft. Another older guy, DeMar DeRozan. He was 31st last year. He's ranked in the 50s this year. So I think people are, scared of the older guys as well. Another guy, Tobias Harris. By consensus, he had a terrible year last year. Everyone's like begging to get him out of Philly, but he was 48th. And, he's ranked around 80th this year. So I think those guys are underrated. It's mainly the older guys.
Yeah. I actually would love to start talking about Tobias Harris because I definitely agree with you there. I think he's going to have a really big season in Detroit. I think he was, pretty much the guy that was blamed for any struggles in Philly. It was always just pinned on Tobias Harris. And now he's going from this team that had championship aspirations that came with a lot of pressure. And now he's going to Detroit, who hasn't had championship aspirations in 20 years, something like that. So it's low pressure. It's a pretty sizable 2-year contract, just kind of saying, hey, we want to make this team not embarrassing and take these young guys and develop them into a future playoff team. Help with that transition. Okay, cool. Tobias Harris comes in, low pressure. He can just go do his thing, get his numbers, and he should be. I mean, I wouldn't imagine he's a top scoring option, but kind of top 2 alongside Cade Cunningham. So yeah, no, I definitely am expecting a big year from him. So this should be pretty fun, just to see him play better after however many years it was of just being embarrassed in Philly. With DeMar, I'm not super concerned, but I'm, I guess, a little bit concerned about the fit in, I guess not the fit in Sacramento, but about the volume of shots in Sacramento, because I feel like he was the guy in Chicago. And now playing alongside De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis is going to have the ball in his hands a good bit. Does that concern you at all? I mean, we also talked about Keegan Murray as well. Is there any concern there with him being in Sacramento now?
Yeah, I definitely get the concern being on a better team. His numbers definitely offensively should go down. But, obviously we know you don't have to score 25 points per game to be a great category league player. Like we said, talking about Tobias, he averaged 17 points last year. So if DeMar, because he averaged 24 last year, if those numbers go down to 18 or 20, he still can have a great dynasty season. And I think that concern you have, a lot of people probably will. They're going to look at him as he was the man in Chicago. He's going to take a step back. It just depends on where you're drafted. I probably wouldn't draft him at 31, but if he's ranked in the 50s and you can get him at 40 in the 40s, I think that's the way you get a little bit of value.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, what did he averaged last year? 24 points, 4.3 rebounds, 5.3 assists, a little over a steal, shot 48% from the field. So maybe it drops to 21, 22 points per game, but maybe he makes up for it a little bit with his efficiency. And he was just outside the top 30 last year. So very realistic path for him to continue to be successful and beat his ADP. And then the other guy you mentioned, Jimmy Butler. Obviously a guy that's tremendous when he's on the court. But the health has kind of been a bit of an issue. I guess what makes you optimistic that it's going to be a bounce back year for him? Because, the numbers were down last year. And are you optimistic that he's about to turn 35, that he's just going to have a bounce back season? Is just like the Jimmy Butler narrative that kind of has you optimistic?
I just think with the injury riddle year, it seems like it. He still played 60 games, but I don't think he was ever fully 100%. He didn't look, like you said, fully himself, and he still averaged 21, 5 and 5. So if he's 100%, even though he's going to be 35, 36, I just expect a better season. It's the Miami aura. It should do something for him as well. So we're trusting even though it's Miami, we're trusting the process with Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, Heat culture should definitely get the most out of him.
Yeah.
The two guys that I have are Aaron Nesmith and Vince Williams. Two guys that, I guess it depends on how you look at it, whether or not they're quote unquote underrated, because a lot of people that dive into Dynasty and are keeping up with things 365 days a year, they obviously know who Aaron Nesmith and Vince Williams are and kept up with them playing well this past season. But I guess for maybe the more casual Dynasty player or casual fantasy player, these names may not excite you quite as much. But Aaron Nesmith ranked just outside the top 100 last year, 12.2 points, just under 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.7 blocks, almost 2 threes. About to turn 25 years old, former lottery pick that didn't pan out in Boston, played well. for Indiana enough to earn, a bit more of a contract. Um, are you how do you feel about Aaron Nesmith? Are you optimistic that after just outside the top 100 last year, top 150 the year before that, that he's a guy that can continue to grow? Or is he a guy where it's like, or excuse me, he was outside the top 150 2022, 2023. I was looking at the wrong numbers. But do you think he's a guy that can continue to grow, or do you think he's kind of capped out?
I think he's kind of capped out because I'm high on Benedict Mathurin, who they drafted 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was injured at the end of last year. So that allowed, Nesmith to get his name out there even more in the playoffs and everything. Great defensive player, great core guy that you want on your team. But I just wonder, what are they going to do with Benedict Mathurin? He showed early on in his rookie season, like, oh man, him and Halliburton are going to be fun in the future. And then he's kind of taking a step back with injuries and poor play, then good play, up and down. Is he ever going to get the job, or are you just going to keep running Aaron Nesmith out there? That's a question that I don't know. But I mean, depending on where you can get Nesmith, he's going to get you those numbers that you can definitely use in fantasy. Even if he's a guy, like a waiver wire guy, you pick him up, drop him, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I agree. I think he has a little bit more upside, but probably not. I mean, I'm not expecting him to hop it to the top 50 or anything like that, but I think probably ceiling would be just inside the top 100. I think it does depend on how many minutes is he getting, and maybe can he improve a little bit on the defensive stats, because he's just under a seal. If he can get over to like 1.2, that would obviously be incredible. I think the Mathurin situation is definitely something that's interesting, because I think you don't expect a player to be picked in the top 6, show plenty of flashes, and then, not out of the picture because there's an injury that had him out of the rotation. But the Pacers made it to the conference finals without him. He probably has a good bit of trade value. And does he fit the style of play that helped them get to the conference finals? I think those are legit questions. When I had Rhett Bauer on, I guess it was a few months ago, he's obviously a big Pacers guy. And that was something that we kind of talked about, bounced the idea around of, what if they traded Mathurin? What if they were able to package him with, I don't know, maybe is Andrew Nembhard a guy that also is kind of at his peak value, and you trade them, package them in, bring another star. That way you have Halliburton, Siakam, Miles Turner, plus another star, in a way that I guess the team still fits and they're playing the same style of basketball that they got them to the conference finals. So I agree. I think if Mathurin's still there, and that's, part of the rotation, like they're just trying to figure out minutes to kind of cannibalize each other, maybe limit both of their production upside. But yeah, it's a luxury for the Pacers to have as much depth as they do currently have. So it's just on us to figure out what it is for fantasy that's the best option, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, knowing Rick Carlisle, he wants to play the veteran. So, he's going to choose Nesmith over Mathurin every day of the week. But will the GM step in? I don't know. Will the owner step? I don't know. But yeah, those are all great points you made as well.
Yeah. And then the other guy was Vince Williams, who obviously played a lot last season, kind of burst onto the scene because of everybody in Memphis being hurt. So he kind of was forced to play minutes, and he played really well. And then while he was playing well, I was kind of like, once they're healthy, like next season, how many minutes is he going to get? Because, Marcus Smart will be back, Desmond Bane, John Morant. Like, you're not starting Vince Williams at power forward. I'm very curious to see what Memphis does with their starting lineup. Do they bring Marcus Smart off the bench and start Vince Williams at the 3, or do they bring Vince Williams off the bench and he gets 20 to 25 minutes per game? But just looking at his numbers from last season, overall, like his role fluctuated throughout the year, but he played 27.6 minutes per game. So maybe a little bit more than he would get if he was coming off the bench, probably about what he would get if he was starting consistently. 10 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.4 assists, just under a steal, 1.5 threes, and just inside the top 150. So I still think he's a guy that you take in a redraft league, in a redraft format, and in Dynasty. Like, he's about to turn 24. He's still young. I think he's still got a lot of room to grow. He's Dylan Brooks without a loud mouth. And I think that works well for the Grizzlies. I don't know. How do you feel about Vince Williams?
Yeah, I agree. I almost was going to put him on my sleeper
Mm,
list for you, but then I was just looking at that starting lineup, like you said. It's like, oh, will they get him in there? It's hard to see them benching Marcus Smart just because of who
right.
he is, and, And then you have the up and coming Gigi Jackson. What's that going to play like? But like you said, he is still a very important piece that can help this team. He's not like a young prospect that they need to develop. Like he's ready to go right now to help a winning team. So I do feel Vince Williams, at worst, he'd probably be the first guy off the bench. So like you
Mhm.
said, 27 minutes last year, he could come close to that and still be a very productive fantasy player. And yeah, like you said, I'm excited to see this Grizzlies depth chart. That's one thing about fantasy. You wish you knew the depth chart before you draft it, but you never really get to. So that's part of the fun in it too, though.
Yeah, because I mean, we can do our projections, and then some coach is going to throw a wrinkle at us on opening night, and then Steve Kerr is going to change his starting lineup 4 times before December. So
Yep.
it's always something you have to keep up with nonstop. So it's fun. It's a grind. We love it. But we'll move on to our overrated guys. These are just guys that I'm a little bit lower on than consensus might be, even though I think I put up two guys that probably have some of their lowest value right now. But what are the two? I mean, I don't know if you have more than two guys, but who are some of your guys that you have as a little bit overrated?
Yeah, I come a little over prepared. I got a couple, but I
Let's do
definitely,
it.
I definitely have Mikael, just like you. He was 90th last year. They have him ranked in the 50s. His name carries a lot of weight. I remember in Dynasty, no one would trade him. Like Mikael is untouchable. It's like his stats are not the greatest, but it's just something about Mikael Bridges. Everybody loves him. He never misses games, so you love that. But he was in Brooklyn where it was his team. Now he's going to the Knicks. He's not going to be the first or second option offensively. He's just going to be a guy that's going to fit in and help them win for sure. But being a top 60 guy, that seems tough for me this year with him for the Knicks.
Yeah, I agree. It's something I've talked about a good, I guess, a handful of times this summer, because I guess not too many, but um, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle are going to be the top options. OG Anunoby's still there. Dante DiVincenzo needs his shots as well because he had a big season last year. So Mikal Bridges was good when he was with the Suns. I think this is a fairly comparable role. But taking him in, like, if he's going in the 50s, like that's pretty much his absolute ceiling is in New York is probably going to be in the 50s. So you're not really getting any value there. I think he's a guy that probably should be going a round or two later in redraft leagues. And in Dynasty, like he's about to turn 28. Like I'm assuming he's going to play in New York for a while. Like they kind of have their squad of guys that also played collegiately together. Like they seem to be there for the long haul. So it's not like Mikal Bridges is just going to be a quick stop here and then go somewhere where he can be a first option once again. So I'm really not seeing a ton of upside for him here. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal player. He's going to help the Knicks win. Like they're going to be a contender, have a chance to win a championship with this team. But for fantasy, yeah, I'm not really super optimistic about drafting Mikal Bridges or trading for him in Dynasty.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So who else do you have on your list?
Would you consider Kyle Kuzma a power forward or small forward? I snuck him in here.
We can go either way. That's fine. We can talk about Kyle Kuzma.
Well, on ESPN, they have him ranked 57th, which is crazy to me. He was 114 last year. And I mean, it's only becoming less of his team, I think, in the future, in the upcoming season. They had 3 first-round picks. None really are going to take his job, but I don't see him getting anywhere near 57.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very strange ranking. Obviously, the points, rebounds, assists, and his threes, like those things are nice, but he has 5 categories that he's either fairly weak in or just pretty average in. So, yeah, I agree. I think that ranking is certainly too high. Washington, like you said, added 3 first-round picks. There's also a very real chance that they trade him at some point because, like, he's probably not part of their future plans. Like they have all these young guys that they just drafted or have drafted in the last couple of years. Jordan Poole's still going to be shooting the basketball a lot this year. Hopefully he'll have a bounce back year, but yeah, I mean, Kuz, even if he sticks around, like there's going to be the 20 games at the end of the year where he probably doesn't play just because they're fighting for lottery odds once again, like trying to get Cooper Flag, like a lot of teams probably will be. So yeah, I agree. I definitely think that's way too high of a ranking for Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah. And if you want to throw out two other names real quick, RJ Barrett and Josh Hart, I just think they're severely overrated for this upcoming season. Josh Hart for the same reason as Mikal. He's losing his role, not necessarily his role, but a lot of minutes due to Mikal coming in. RJ Barrett is ranked in the 80s, and last year he was 192nd. So that's all I got to say about that.
ESPN, they always get the high scorers they just love on their rankings. So yeah, I think RJ Barrett he'll get you 20 points per game, and I'm fairly certain he'll help a little bit with 3-pointers, but pretty much every other category. Okay, so 1.6 threes, 5.4 rebounds, 3.3 assists last year. So the free throw percentage is pretty bad. He's not giving you any defensive numbers. So yes, the points are helpful, but I agree. And very overrated in fantasy. I think he's a good basketball player. I think he played well for Canada this summer in the Olympics. But yeah, I agree. That's a little bit too high of a ranking. Like if you're taking RJ Barrett in, what would that be, round 7? Like that's a way to lose your draft. And then Josh Hart. Yeah, I think he's a guy that the narrative really helped him / helps him currently of what he did during the playoffs and just down the stretch for the Knicks. All the quotes, the podcast with Jalen Brunson, all these things just make people like Josh Hart. But I think if we're looking at it in fantasy, with the amount of players that they have, I'm not going to be looking to draft him anywhere. Now, he is a guy that if they continue to deal with injuries like they did all of last season, or at least down the stretch last season, he is a guy that will be worth keeping an eye on to pick up off the waiver wire to stream because he has been really good at times. But with Mikal and OG starting, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle starting, and then Mitch Robinson starting, Josh Hart off the bench, really good basketball player, not a great fantasy option.
Totally agree. Okay, so you have Brandon Ingram up on the screen. I got to hear. I'm a Brandon Ingram fan. Let's hear what you got.
Yeah. So part of it is that it was just a down season. And again, like I said, I'm just a little bit lower on Brandon Ingram. It's not, I still think he's a very good player. Coming off a pretty subpar fantasy season. I think I'm a little bit concerned about what his role looks like either in New Orleans or if he gets traded elsewhere, because guys like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy and Zion are all there. So Brandon Ingram's minutes should be there if he's still in New Orleans, but with the way that things ended last season, it wouldn't be shocking if they tried to mix in some of those guys a little bit more. I think the amount of injuries that they have dealt with as a team, last season was probably better than the last few as far as who's playing more games, but it's kind of hard to make all of that work together. So I would be pretty surprised if Brandon Ingram was still in New Orleans, but it does kind of seem like the fact that there hasn't been a trade yet does make me think that maybe there's a chance. But then again, I think just come trade deadline time, his name is going to be heating up once again as far as a guy that could potentially be moved. I like him as a basketball player. I just don't think he's great in fantasy. And then the injury history as well. Just I'm not optimistic about him being able to play. He played 64 games last year. I'm just going to double check myself here. So that was the most that he's played since he went to New Orleans, or is it maybe the most since? Yeah, that was the most he's played since his rookie year with the Lakers, actually. So
wow, that's it doesn't seem like that. I know last year he missed a lot of games. That's a crazy stat. So I get your point on that. I'm looking toward. I expect him to get traded, and I think that would be better for him. So whoever does trade for him, they're going to want him. They're going to pay for him that big contract that he wants. Because Brandon Ingram, I remember when Zion was hurt that year, that's when Brandon Ingram was an all-star. He definitely plays better when Zion is not there. So if he gets traded away from New Orleans, his value would go up. But like you said, we're waiting on that. It could happen. It could not happen. If it does, he could provide a value for you if you get him where he's ranked right now. But yeah, I get your point. I definitely get your point.
Yeah, and I think the reason that his fantasy numbers have gone down, he's hitting less threes. So his best fantasy season was his first year in New Orleans. He hit 2.4 3-pointers per game. Next year, just outside the top 50, 2.3. And the last 3 years, it was 1.3, 1.4, and then back to 1.3 this past season. That being said, so I think if whatever team he ends up going to, if it's assuming he does get traded, if they're encouraging him to shoot threes, and like obviously he's gonna have the ball in his hands a good bit, but maybe he's playing with a player that can set him up a little bit better so he can get more 3-point opportunities that are pretty clean looks. I think that would help his fantasy game. If you had to like pick a team for him to get traded to, or multiple teams, if you have a few that you like that you think would maximize his fantasy output, like what teams do you think that would be?
Well, what comes to mind is probably the Wizards. We were just talking about with Kuzma. Let him be on a bad team and just do whatever he wants. That just comes to mind. And the Brooklyn Nets, but yeah, I don't think a contender is probably going to trade for him. So it probably will be a team that's going to need his scoring.
Yeah. I think there was, so I'm a Hawks fan, so I keep up with the rumors and stuff like that for them.
Yeah.
And there was definitely rumors, I don't know how legitimate they were, but that there was at least interest at some point. So I think if he was playing alongside a guy like Trae Young that was setting him up for some good open 3-point looks, that would work well. But then that probably causes a dip in his assists per game. So
yeah,
I think that's like a scenario, but not sure if it's the best one.
Well, they do have DeJounte Murray coming in there, so he might can set him up pretty well, be the point guard he needed. But yeah, I just think he doesn't play his best game with Zion. So
yeah, I think, goodness, I totally forgot about DeJounte while we were talking about it, but DeJounte and CJ McCollum are there, and then Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram's not. So it's like, what does the starting lineup even look like? Because is CJ McCollum going to get moved to sixth man? Are they taking Herb Jones and Trey Murphy off the bench? I mean, that's probably what it ends up being based off of name value. But those are two guys that make a huge impact on the team and really help them win. So New Orleans definitely, that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on for as far as who's going to start and who's going to see the minutes there.
Sure.
Yeah. Any other guys that you had as somewhat overrated, or do you want to move on to sleepers?
Those are my four. I don't want to call out anybody else.
Perfect. So we'll move on to sleepers. I actually have 5 on my list. This is my longest list because I was going down. I was like, gosh, at the top, I'm like not liking a lot of these small forward names. So then I started getting down. I was like, oh, I like a lot of these guys, a lot of upside. Probably none of them are going to pan out, but if they do, then it'll be great. But do you want to go through how many sleepers do you have?
I have 5 as well. So
perfect. Let's go like one-to-one. We'll just kind of swap through it. I'll let you start though. Who's your first sleeper?
Okay, my first guy is Ausar Thompson for Detroit. He was 178th last year as a rookie, ranked 159th this year. So he missed 19 games. He had the blood clot. That's going to scare a lot of people. People are probably going to be terrified to draft him this year. But, there's a new leadership in Detroit. We were all scratching our head because he was so great that first month, putting up stats all over the board. And then his numbers his playing minutes just declined. It's like, what is Monty doing? Play Ausar, so he only averaged 25 minutes per game when he was a very productive rookie. It was very weird, but he showed the bright spots. Like I say, he can do the rebounding, the assists, the steals. And if he gets minutes in Detroit this year, which he should, being the 6th pick of the draft last year. Of course, they did bring in Ron Holland. They brought in Tobias. So it's going to kind of be a lot of guys there. But there's no reason for Ausar not to be playing. Especially, I think bringing in Tobias helps him. Because if you have Ausar and Holland, that's going to be tough to play them two together. But with Tobias, Ausar should be able to play more and be very productive for that team. And at worst, fill the Herb Jones role, and we know how well that works out for him in New Orleans.
Yeah, no, for sure. Starting last season, he may have even been like the best rookie for like the first 3 weeks. even better than how Wemby was playing. And then all of a sudden, yeah, Monty Williams was one of the many things that everybody's like, Monty Williams, what are you doing? Like, just play him. He is probably the best defender on the team, and he's grabbing a ton of rebounds. Like, this is something that the team really needs. But hopefully, I think JB Bickerstaff will value that defense a good bit. And then hopefully, I believe the shooting coach from New Orleans, Fred Vinson, has the history of working with Herb Jones, with Lonzo, and fixing their jumpers. So if he's able to help Asar Thompson and help Ron Holland as well improve their jumpers, that'll work out really well for Detroit. I remember when I was doing a little research at some point on Asar Thompson, and I saw on Twitter people calling him either Airball Man or something, or like Mr. Airball, and like it was like Pistons fans, and I was like, because they were saying, "Oh, I can't believe we drafted Airball Man or Mr. Airball or whatever it was." I was like, "All right, I'm just gonna go look at just his 3-point attempts," and it was baffling how many times it was like just like from the corner, like just barely touching the backboard or like way over the rim. I'm like, oh my gosh, like they weren't lying. Like he really has to work on this shot. But the defense is obviously there, and hopefully he'll get a chance to work on that. Because if he's at least like a, I don't know, slightly below average shooter, like he's going to be a freaking good fantasy player.
Well, you made the great point that they're bringing in New Orleans shooting coach, because Herb Jones shot 9% in college from 3. So I haven't seen a number worse than that. And he got that up to the 30s. So if he can do anything close to that with Asar, that is the perfect hire.
Yeah. Gosh, 9%. Well, yeah. Okay. That makes sense why he was drafted in the second round. Because I feel like he's like, I've seen that tossed around. It's like, how did everybody let him fall to the second round? Well, just shooting 9% from 3. I think it's something for people to question a little bit. The first sleeper I have, I'll just go with the picture guys first. I have Leonard Miller, who hasn't seen the floor a ton for Minnesota yet, but I don't even have like a ton of numbers to throw out, but like has played well at times in the G League, played well this summer in summer league. I think as he continues to develop as a player, it may still be a couple more years, but he's a guy that has a fantasy friendly game once he is able to fill out the minutes. And with Kyle Anderson went to the Warriors, so that does potentially open up some minutes. So maybe we'll get to see him in short spurts this season, and then over the next few years, he can continue to expand his role. That way, at some point, Minnesota is going to have to make probably some roster changes unless they start winning championships and they're just willing to open up the checkbook to keep this team together. But he's a guy that if they, in a year or two decide to break up Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert and either move Cat back to center or move on from him, he's a guy that can step in and fill out some of those power forward minutes and potentially be a really fantasy friendly player.
I love Leonard Miller. I was high on him during the draft. It just seems like he's, like you said, stuck on that contending team. Contending teams don't like to play young guys if they don't have to. I remember last year when Cat got hurt, I was like, oh, it's Leonard Miller time. No, it was Naz Reid time. So I have my fingers crossed for Leonard Miller. And like you said, he was great in the G League all season. He's kind of in the Gigi Jackson territory. Gigi was just on a bad team where everyone got hurt. So he got to play. Leonard Miller, good team, didn't get to play. If the roles were reversed, we would be thinking the same as about Gigi as we are about Gigi, as we are about Leonard.
I got you. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Who's your next sleeper on your list?
Okay, I gotta say Bilal Coulibaly. He was ranked 238th last year in 27 minutes per game. Ranked around that, projected to be that this year. I think he definitely would be a lot higher. Yahoo has him at 135. That's more realistic. He definitely should be more in the rotation and be able to improve in every aspect of his game. I mean, that's what they drafted him for. They knew he was not completely ready year one, but each year he should get better. And, they traded Denny as well. So that opens up a hole for him. They did not draft another player in his position. Like we said, they just have Kuzma, Jordan Poole, those guys. They're not the future, I don't feel. Bilal is the future with Alex Sarr and the young point guard they just drafted as well. So I think Bilal should have a good year this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think like defensively already has shown a ton. And then offensively, if you look at some of his like shot attempts early in the year versus the last handful of games of the season, like he's already shown that he's taken steps forward on the offensive end, shot creation. So yeah, I'm expecting him to have a even better year this upcoming season. You mentioned the 135. Like I think he's definitely a guy that I would take in the last round or two of pretty much every draft. Just because Washington's gonna stink again, and he's gonna see a ton of minutes because they're gonna want to see what kind of player he can end up being. Is he a guy that is a rotation piece / solid starter that's really good defensively, or is he a guy that is a lot more than that and can mean a lot more to the team? So I think they'll want to try and answer that question. Definitely going to give him the opportunity, and I'm expecting that to work out pretty well for fantasy, specifically with the defensive numbers. So yeah, I think it should be a fun season coming up for the Wizards, specifically for Bilal as well. The next guy I have this other picture of Bryce Sensabaugh, another guy who didn't play a ton as a rookie. I think had some after Utah kind of pulled the plug, saw more opportunities, had some good games down the stretch, but then really it was this summer for me. Like he had like a really, really good summer in limited games because he was playing pretty well. So I think this upcoming season, I'm expecting him to see more minutes just because he's entering year 2, played well in stretches. And now as Utah, once again, they're a team that will kind of pull the plug at some point and will give him more free reign. So I'm expecting him to be a solid rotation piece early on. And then as the season wears on, he'll kind of pop off the last 2 months and just prove that he's supposed to be like, or that he is an important part of their future.
My only issue with that is Cody Williams. What's going to happen with that? Because, if you go by invested draft capital, Cody was the 10th pick. Bryce was in the 20s. I definitely think Bryce deserves minutes. Like you said, he showed me some stuff last year, and I was excited. But I think Jordan Clarkson may have to get moved. I don't know. Or they could just have Cody in the G League all year and have Bryce in the spot. It's Utah's another one of those teams. A lot of young talent, and we don't know which way they're going to go with all of it.
Too much. It makes it frustrating because it's like there's a lot of guys that are a lot of fun on that team. I really liked Cody Williams. If I'm not mistaken, you love Isaiah Collier, and now he's going to be behind Keontae George for a bit, and they'll have to figure that out. So, yeah, it is going to be really frustrating and really annoying, but they have so much young talent that, like, one more year of tanking. So, like, if they're able to add Cooper Flagg, like, this is just such an unreal young core. Like, there's going to be at least, like, I'll say at least 2 young guys that they're just going to have to, like, move off of because there's so much talent and that these guys just aren't going to be getting the minutes that they deserve. So they could probably still get a pretty decent return back from them. So we'll see what that ends up being. But yeah, they're set up. They're set up well.
Yeah. If they would not have re-signed Lauri Markkanen, then, I mean, look out Cody Williams, look out Bryce Sensabaugh.
No.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
Goodness, just from the beginning, if they would have tanked instead of deciding to stop playing basketball at the trade deadline, that would have been fun. But yeah, I guess it'll be another full season before Markkanen is trade eligible. It's just the way they work the trade out or the contract out so that he won't be eligible to be traded until next summer, which is pretty annoying for fantasy. But heck, if he's just fully bought in, I mean, that's what it was with SGA like 2 years ago. People were saying that he was going to ask out. And then there was reports of him just being very happy with the front office's direction. And they were able to turn it around pretty quickly by drafting well. And it seems like Utah is following that same trajectory. So that'll be fun if those 2 teams are just battling it out with 10 lottery picks each over the next 5 to 10 years.
Danny Ainge has something up his sleeve. We know that.
Yeah. Who is next on your small forward list for sleeper?
Okay, this might be cheating because I don't know if they're up on it yet, but they should be. Zachary Richer, the first pick in the draft, is ranked in the 400s. I mean, what in the world is going on? That's on Yahoo and ESPN. Like, I know people are not that high on him, but in the 400s, I mean, I think he has potential to start. It's your team. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, Noah. But I think Zachary could, provide a little value for the Hawks this year.
Yeah, I think for me, one, I wasn't super thrilled with the pick, but I'm trying to rationalize that. Okay, like this is the front office. They brought this guy in for workouts. They think that this is the guy that's going to be the best fit. Cool, whatever. But then they better start him, in my opinion, because if you're going to draft him just to bring him off the bench behind DeAndre Hunter, like, why did you draft him then? So I'm hoping that he starts just so we can really get a good idea of what he can be. Be able to provide some threes early on. I think that's probably the strongest category that he'll be able to kind of provide in, because not expecting a ton of points, not expecting great rebounding numbers. He's a good defender, but I'm not expecting a ton of steals and blocks. Like, I'm not sure the fantasy game here. I think he's going to be a player, like, if he develops the right way, a elite 3-point shooter that can also play defense really well and is 6'10". Like, if they're calling him just like a 6'10" Klay Thompson, like, yeah, like that's a player that's going to be really freaking good. But I'm not as optimistic on that, and I question about the fantasy upside. However, 400 is definitely way too low. So hopefully they just haven't added rookies in. But yeah, that's way too low.
Yeah. Well, I'm rooting for you on that one. Well, look,
where did you have him ranked?
Well, as far as in the draft this year, he was my 9th ranked prospect.
Okay.
So, but I'm a Hornets fan. Like we mentioned with Brandon Miller, I wanted Scoot. So you could be in the same boat. Maybe you have your Brandon Miller this year. So
fingers crossed. That would be that would make me get kind of bought back in, if because it's kind of waning with the last 3 years being as frustrating as they have been. But I will go. So I got 3 more sleepers. Which one do I want to go with? I'll go Jordan Wall. That's my deep cut one that I'm like,
that's deep.
Don't touch him in a redraft league. Like, definitely don't. But I think so he's a 5-star recruit, went to Arkansas, was there. That ended up going to Boston the 2nd round. Didn't obviously show a ton this past season because he didn't see the floor much, but was like a really good defensive player. I think that it's not like a ton of substantial numbers where I can say like, yeah, like this is, he showed this, he did this, like this is why I think he's going to become this. Like, just think he has a good bit of upside, and that if you're in your 30 team dynasty league and you're looking for a last round pick or a little guy to stash that could potentially turn into something, like he's supposed to be a really good defender, and he's practicing every day with Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. Like, I think he's going to pick up a thing or two. Yeah. And, maybe within the next 2 years, they can get him into the rotation, and then even past that, just continue to give him more and more minutes so he can develop. I think he has the tools there. So that's why he's a deep, deep, deep sleeper, but he is a sleeper.
I like that. Like we talked about Bilal, he averaged 8 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block.
Yeah.
Walsh could definitely do that if he got the minutes. He can have that type of year. So it's just getting the minutes. We don't want to talk about injuries, but that's what he would need to have.
Right. Well, in Boston, he'd probably need I don't know, so many injuries for that to happen. So maybe it ends up being a trade or something that gets him into the rotation somewhere.
But he definitely has an NBA prototype that a lot of teams want, especially on defense. Since you're going deep cuts, I'll go deep too. Zaire Williams, obviously he's a lottery pick, but he's not thought of that much this year. He was ranked 313th last year. ESPN has him in the 200s this year. He was injured, missed the second half of the season, but he was traded from Memphis to Brooklyn. If you hadn't heard, Brooklyn is a bad rebuilding team. He could get some opportunity there. I mean, he's a lottery pick. What does Brooklyn have to lose to play him? And he showed some flashes in Memphis, especially when he played with Ja. That's when he looked his best. They don't have a Ja, obviously, but we're hoping to see some flashes of that lottery talent. He has the prototypical body as well, 6'9", 6'10", long arms. Can't really shoot it, but we want to see what he can do. Put him out there. Mikal's gone.
Yeah. I mean, I remember he was starting for Memphis, at least for a good bit of his rookie year, and then kind of fell off the last 2 years or so, but definitely he'll have a chance to fix things in Brooklyn because, like you said, like this team is going to be tanking. They are going to be bad. Like they're going to continue to trade away their solid veteran players in the hopes to getting more draft capital back because they are going to go through a long, slow rebuild. They're going to be trying to add Cooper Flag. So like Zaire Williams should see the minutes, like no problem at all. And if he's not playing well, they'll probably continue to give him minutes because he's either going to figure it out or they're going to improve their lottery odds. So one way or another, yeah, I think he'll definitely have the opportunity. So I got two more guys. I will go with Julian Strother to start in Denver. I think that there's a chance that he's seeing a pretty sizable rotation a pretty sizable role in the rotation. There we go. This upcoming season, I played well in Summer League the last 2 years. This past season, 2 appearances because he was averaging 28.5 points and 4.5 threes per game. And I think playing alongside Jokic, like that actually makes it easier for players to play offense, believe it or not. So I think he's going to get a lot of easy looks and be a pretty critical part of the rotation. Like they lost KCP. They didn't really get a replacement. So I think Christian Brown will probably get the first crack at that. But Julian Strother is a much better floor spacer. So I would assume he'll be a pretty decent sized part of their rotation this upcoming season. And if he's knocking down shots and Christian Brown is not playing super well, then it wouldn't be shocking if Julian Strother was starting at some point this season. So I don't know. How do you feel about Strother?
I totally agree with everything you said. I love Julian Strother as well. You nailed that one. I didn't even think of Strother. Great call. I think he definitely should get minutes this year. He's shown at every turn he deserves it. He just hasn't had the opportunity. So yeah, and he might can play with Christian Brown. Maybe, I don't know, but that might be pushing it. But we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I cheated my qualifications because I'm trying to start him at shooting guard, and this was supposed to be the small forward list. But whatever, we'll just roll with it. Yeah. Who do you got next on your list?
Okay, since you cheated, I'm gonna cheat a little bit.
Cool.
Caleb Martin, went from Miami to Philly. I consider him a small forward, but he's gonna be listed as the starting power forward in Philly. I don't know how that's gonna work, but he's not a power forward. But he was ranked 200th by ESPN. He was 208 last year, and that was in 27 minutes per game in Miami, where he was not that big of a factor because they had Jaime Jaquez. So with him starting and being at power forward, that should allow him to put up all different type of numbers. He's not going to be, like I said, first, second, third option, whatever. But if he's taking Tobias Harris's role, even though he's nowhere near as good as Tobias Harris, that could be some upside for you to look into for a guy that's not being drafted. You could take him in your last round. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't. But, Caleb Martin is a guy that's getting the opportunity. You're looking for a starter. When one of your last picks, Caleb Martin is going to start.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. He was outside the top 200 last year, but he was inside the top 150 the year before that.
Right.
And it won't be difficult for him to replicate 10 points, 5 rebounds, a steal, and a 3. Like that should be pretty easy for him to do in Philly because Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Joel Embiid, like those guys are going to be drawing a lot of defensive attention. So yeah, Caleb Martin getting a corner 3 or 2 every game, like that's pretty realistic. And then him contributing more defensively than he did last season. Like, yeah, no, I like that one a lot. My last one that I have is, I don't think this maybe is slightly cheating again. But maybe he's a power forward, but he hasn't played a game yet. So I'm going to just say he's a small forward. And then if they decide to play him at power forward, then whatever. But Ryan Dunn, the rookie out of Virginia, who's now in Phoenix. We're not going to talk about the off. Well, I guess we'll acknowledge the offense. But the defense is really, really good. As for both steals and blocks, but specifically his block rate was insane in college, just comparable to some of the best shot blocking bigs. And he's more of an athletic wing. How much his offense develops is going to dictate how much he plays for the Suns this year. But they have enough offense, so his defense should get him on the floor a decent amount. And if he's able to at least knock down an open catch and shoot, he's going to play a ton and be a pretty big factor for the Suns in his first season. I thought it was a fantastic pick for them to get him in the late first round.
I totally agree. He can play like an All-Star Thompson type of role for them.
Yeah.
It's just if they let him go out there, it's I don't know if
right.
coach is going, Coach Budenholzer from Milwaukee, is he going to want to play the rookie when you have a championship team? If you do, this is the type of rookie you want. Defense,
right?
That's going to help the team. Doesn't need the ball. Not going to be a ball stopper. Not going to shoot, but like I said, those stocks are crazy with Ryan Dunn. I would love to see him play with KD. What better player for him to play with than Kevin Durant? So yeah, great call. He's easy, or he's just going to be in G League all year. But I think they can use him for sure. I mean, they're going to probably want to play Royce O'Neal just because he's a veteran, but he can play his role when he's out.
Yeah. And I think Royce O'Neal will probably fit a little bit better offensively. I think they just need guys that can play defense. So hopefully that'll get Ryan Dunn some minutes. If it doesn't, maybe he'll develop a little bit offensively in the G League for a year, and then it'll be better for him long term. But who do you have as your last sleeper?
Okay, you touched on him a little bit earlier, but Trey Murphy, even though everyone knows him, but on ESPN he's ranked 127. On Yahoo he's ranked 97, and he was 66 last year. So he should be able to have that similar type of role as last year. And like we mentioned earlier, if Ingram is moved, look out. He's a guy that when we talked about our top tier dynasty small forwards, I wanted to mention, but I can't yet. I think next year he'll be a guy that we all mentioned. So we're all looking for Trey Murphy to just get more opportunity. Even though he was at around 29 minutes last year, it still was not his team. He was more fitting in. I think if Ingram is gone, it'll be more opportunity for him to do what he can do best and not just spot up,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I think I mentioned that as like him and Tari Eason are guys that it's like, if they have the opportunity, they'll move into that top tier, but they just haven't gotten that opportunity. So yeah, hopefully it'll work out where he's able to see, he played almost 30 minutes per game last year. If he's able to do that or more this year, that'd be phenomenal because as a talent, he's excellent. So yeah, no, I think in the dynasty community, he may not be a quote unquote sleeper just because, like I said, if you have the sickos that are keeping up with everything, but with your more casual fantasy players, he's absolutely a sleeper. He's definitely a guy that we need to be keeping tabs on. I'm realizing now New Orleans has a good bit of decisions to make before the season starts or at some point during the season. So hopefully some of those will benefit Trey Murphy. But that's the talk on small forwards. Before I let you go, what do you have any content coming up that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, yeah, I host the All Rookie podcast. Thanks again, Noah, for having me on. So anything All Rookie, you're going to be hearing from me about it. Waiting for the preseason to come up. In the meantime, I'm going to be doing, probably dynasty rankings and go over some mock drafts that I've done. And I love how we touched on some rookies in this, show today, even hitting Ryan Dunn and guys like that. So if you want to hear about rookies, check me out at the All Rookie podcast. Check me out on Twitter at William is Bill. And once again, thank you, Noah Rubin, for having me on your show. Or you can thank me later, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And actually, one more thing, because I think if you look at your rookie rankings, they tend to be pretty different from, I guess, most people's. And I think, can you just talk a little bit about like how you either maybe give us a little bit of an insight into how you go about scouting, like how much you use film versus numbers, or like what kinds of things do you look for without giving away too many, I guess, secrets?
Yeah, I had to kill you if I did that. No, but no, I just watch the tape and see. I kind of translate, is this type of player flourishing in the NBA? And I think that goes a long way. So if you see a guy that, like Wembanyama, I was wrong on him because I'm like, you don't see that in the NBA. Is that going to work? Is he going to stay healthy? I was skeptical, but he's an alien. So, but for the most part, that technique works out for me. Like Isaiah Collier, like you said, I'm high on him. A point guard that can do what he does is what every team is looking for in the NBA right now. And so I thought his value was definitely much higher than 29. So if he gets the opportunity, he can prove everyone wrong. We will see. But yeah, shooting, size, most of the typical things. Most small point guards are not going to work. Things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, definitely everybody check that out. Follow him on Twitter at William is Bill, and check out the All Rookie podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that. Thank you again for joining me, and that's going to do it for this episode of the Take Me Later podcast. And I will see you next time.
Peace.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.